Hello and welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Graham Hughes. Today is kind of a big day because today I am doing a brand new computer build. And as you can see, I've got some of the parts that I've just recently purchased for my new build here. And I wanted to talk about why I am building an AM4 PC in 2024. So it's just at the end of July 2024 and all these parts are AM4 parts. Why on earth would I do something like that? Well, I was watching a YouTube video not too long ago. It was one of the well-known tech guys that I know and respect, and he was mentioning how now with AM5 having come out and with prices come down on DDR5 memory and a few other things, it didn't really make sense to build an AM4 computer anymore. And his argument was if you're building an entire new computer as opposed to upgrading an existing AM4 motherboard, you might as well just go ahead and build a full AM5 rig. And I thought about that advice a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I kind of got to disagree with it. Because it's sort of very flat advice that was given out to everybody and kind of given in a way that sort of implied it applies to everybody universally. And I don't think it does. And here's why. I think when you're looking at building a new computer, there's two things you have to think about. You have to think about where you are with your computers right now. And you have to think really hard about what your needs are. So the computer that I'm building here, this is going to be a replacement for my current gaming PC. Now my current gaming PC is a Ryzen 5 3600 processor, an AMD RX 5700 graphics card. I've got a 550 watt power supply and 16 gigabytes of 3000 megahertz memory. So that's been a really good gaming PC for me. I built it 4 years ago, right at the start of the pandemic in March of 2020. It's worked really well. And the thing is, the kind of gaming I like to do, I'm not a competitive gamer by any means. I'm the kind of guy, I like very relaxing games. So just about everything I play is like open world games with beautiful graphics. I play Euro Truck Simulator, American Truck Simulator. I play the Hunter Call of the Wild. These are the things I like. So it's not massively multiplayer. It's not a whole lot of high-speed action that requires a lot of CPU. All these games, what they require is a really good graphics card. Now, as you probably know, I'm kind of a budget guy. I don't go out and buy the latest and greatest. I'm not buying an RTX 4090. And for this build, I'm on a really tight budget. I've had a whole bunch of house expenses this year and some other things come up, some schooling expenses. So I went into this thinking, I really want to upgrade my PC because the updates that I've had for like Euro Truck Simulator and the Hunter Call of the Wild, I've noticed that I've had to take my graphics settings down in order to maintain a reasonable frame rate of, 60 or 70 FPS. So whenever I have to start, dialing back the quality of my graphics, that's usually the time I start thinking about a new gaming PC. So with these updates, that's what happened. I thought, okay, how can I get into a better PC, a better gaming PC for really not much money for the bare minimum? So I was looking forward to the Amazon Prime Day coming. That was about the middle of July. And this Power Color RX 6750 XT graphics card came up. And it was $445 Canadian. Now to convert Canadian to US, you can divide by about 1.38. So 445 Canadian, that is cheap, cheap, cheap for an RX 6750. So I thought, okay, I really need to get this graphics card. But the problem I had is my 550 watt power supply isn't going to power that because it's a lot more wattage than my RX 5700. So I found this Cooler Master 850 watt power supply on sale for $125. So it was $444 for this, $125 for this. That gets me up to about $569 just for these two. So my original thought, my computer that I have, it's on a B450M motherboard. I could have just bought these two, used my existing memory, my existing Ryzen 5 3600, my existing B450M motherboard, had a nice upgrade. I know this graphics card will drive about 40 to 50% more frames than my existing RX 5700. All the videos that I've watched, all the reviews I've seen of this card, that's what I expect is that 40 to 50% increase. So that's pretty good, right? So for just under $570, I could get a 50% increase hopefully on my frame rates on these games. And hopefully that'll help me carry my computer forward for a couple more years before I do a full rebuild. But then I started thinking about it, and I have a bunch of spare parts kicking around. If you're like me and you're a bit of a hobbyist, you probably swap parts in and out and you collect some spares. So what I have is I've got a spare case. I've got 16 gigabytes of 3200 megabyte, I've got 16 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz memory. I've got a 1 gigabyte SATA SSD, and I've got a couple of spare licenses for Windows that I'm not using right now. So with all those spare parts, if I'm replacing my RX 5700 to my 550 watt power supply, I realized if I had a motherboard and a new CPU, between what I have now, my spare parts, my current gaming PC, and this, I actually have 2 PCs. So I thought maybe it would be better, rather than just upgrading the parts on my current PC, maybe if I bought these extra 2 parts, I could put together that second PC and I could sell it to offset some of my costs. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So on this build that I'm doing right now, what I'm going to end up with, or what I've bought, is I bought the Ryzen 5 5600X CPU. That was $177.64. My Power Color RX 6750 XT was $443.99. I got a smoking deal on this ASRock B550M Pro 4. Newegg was selling this off at a huge discount. $99.74 Canadian was the cost of that. And then my Cooler Master 850 watt power supply was on sale for $124.99 at Amazon. So for all 4 of these parts, I basically spent $846.36. Now when I'm done building this new computer with these parts plus a couple of my spares, what I'm going to have left over is I'm going to have a second computer with my old Ryzen 5 3600 CPU, my old RX 5700 GPU. It's going to have 16 gigabytes of RAM at 3000 megahertz, and it's going to have that 550 watt power supply. Now I know here locally where I live, I can sell a computer like that for between $500 and $600. So if I spent $846 on all this, I can sell my old parts built up into a new computer for $550. That leaves me a net cost of my upgrade of just $296.36 Canadian. So if I had just done the upgrade, I'd be looking at $569. But by buying these extra parts that are on sale, because let's face it, these are the old generation now, so you're starting to see some big discounts. By buying these extra parts, I spent an extra, $270 or $280, but because I have a second computer to sell, the total cost of my upgrade goes from $569 down to $296. So by buying more parts and building another computer, actually the whole thing's going to be a whole lot cheaper than if I had just done the upgrade. Now the question is, what if I had followed the advice of that YouTuber, and instead of building this AM4 platform, I decided to upgrade to AM5? Well, if we look at the next set of numbers I'm going to show you here, so I'm basically buying all the exact same things, but with the Ryzen 5, or with the AM5 platform in mind. So an equivalent CPU would be a Ryzen 5 7600X, that's $275. I've got the same graphics card. I would need an AM5 motherboard. The cheapest I can find there is a Gigabyte B650M, which is $170. Use the same power supply. Now, because if I go to AM5, I need DDR5 memory, so 16 gigabytes of DDR5 memory is another $100. So my costs for everything would go to $1,113.96. So instead of the $846.36 I paid for this, I'd be paying $1,113.96. Now, if I still have that same old PC to sell, which I would, because I'd still have the AM4 parts that I've got kicking around to bundle into a new PC, my net cost is $563.96. So building an AM5 PC, after I sell my old PC, the AM5 PC is going to cost me almost double what the AM4 is. Now, it's not tons of money. It's like $265 difference or so. But when you're on a tight budget, that makes all the difference between maybe an upgrade that's affordable and an upgrade that isn't. And here's the interesting thing. If I build that AM5 platform instead of the AM4, and I spend that extra $270 to do it, I'm not getting anything out of it. Because as I said, the kind of gaming I like to do is open world gaming, kind of slow moving, very relaxing with beautiful graphics. I'm not into competitive gaming. I don't do high frame rate or high FPS gaming. I don't need any of that. So when I look at my games are almost all bound by the graphics card. My CPU is kind of, even with my old Ryzen 5 3600, it's not working very hard, but my graphics card is always at 100%, rendering all these beautiful scenes in these open world games. And I should point out that I game on a 32-inch 1440p monitor. So I'm not gaming at 1080, I'm gaming at 1440p, so even more weight is put on my graphics card. So going with AM5 now, following that advice, I'd end up spending more money. It wouldn't do anything for me because I don't need the faster memory. I don't need the faster CPU. I can get by on this 5600X or even my old 3600 if I wanted and do just fine. So when you're taking advice from folks on YouTube, even myself, or from magazine articles or wherever, keep in mind that they're talking to a general audience. They're not talking about your specific circumstances. So if you're like me and you're always trying to get the most bang for your buck, it's really important to know, look, what do I have kicking around that I can use now? And what do I really need out of my computer? And then you can find ways to cut costs like I've done here. At the end of the day, this upgrade is going to cost me less than $300 Canadian. That's like $215 US. I'm going to get 50% more FPS than I have now, 40 to 50% more FPS than I have now. And I think that's a heck of a deal. And the interesting thing is, one of the things I say about AM5 is, oh, well, AM4, there's no upgrade path anymore. But again, looking what I'm building here, this is not maxing out the AM4 platform yet. Let's say 2 years down the road, I'm finding this RX 6750 doesn't meet my needs anymore. I could go with like an equivalent to an RTX 4090, and I could get like a Ryzen 7 5800X 3D CPU, and I'd have way more frames yet. So if I build this, I could do another upgrade in 2 or 3 years and still be way ahead of where I am today. Now, of course, the question is, well, why don't you do that upgrade today? And the fact of it is, I just can't afford it. Like, this is my budget $300 upgrade. This is all I'm willing to put into it right now. So I hope you find that helpful. I think that's a good example of why sometimes you can't listen to people's advice and you really have to go with your gut and look at your circumstances and do what works for you. Because in this case, by sticking with the AM4 platform, by using a mix of new parts as well as stuff I got kicking around, by selling an old PC in order to finance my new PC, I'm saving a ton of money, and I'm going to end up with a much better gaming PC as a result. So I hope you find that helpful. I think there's some good thoughts there that you might be able to apply to your own situation. Again, I'm Graham Hughes. This is Tech Talk. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.